Welcome into the Wiltfong Whip Around with Steve Wiltfong. I'm your host, Josh Newberg, and today is Monday, September 9th, week 2. It was crazy. There was some big upsets, some big wins, some big visit weekends, some big new predictions. We got it all. We're going to cover some USC, Nebraska, Miami, Georgia recruiting. We're going to break it all down in this video. We even got some new RPM picks from Steve as well. Doesn't get any better than this. Steve Wiltfong, he's as plugged in as any man in the industry. We're going to get to sit with him for about 20 or 30 minutes and find out all the new intel he's got heading into this week. Nothing gets you closer to being inside those recruiting war rooms than the Wiltfong Whip Around. Make sure you guys hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. We're out here talking recruiting all season long. We want you to be a part of it. So I can also get you to On3 for just $1. Yeah, On3 for just $1. I know you've been thinking about it, but you can do it now. Use promo code FONG1. Go to on3.com. Use promo code FONG1. Read everything that Steve writes about Chad Simmons, Pete Nakos. You can get it all for $1. That's promo code FONG1. All right, big show today. Let's bring in Steve Wiltfong. Steve, we are going to get this thing started in Southern California. The Trojans, they are getting it done on the field and on the recruiting trail. Some major developments with USC Recruiting we're going to talk about in this video. First, though, huge commitment this weekend. On3's number one linebacker, Tai Jackson. He's a little higher on the industry, but On3 has him as the number one linebacker in America. How was USC able to close this out and get a commitment from Tai Jackson, who's from Florida?
Well, Eric Henderson's been the lead recruiter on Tai Jackson, building a relationship with him and his family to get him to come out to USC on the official visit. And before the trip, we said, hey, you shoot your shot in recruiting. Yeah. Sometimes you never know what's going to happen. And this time it paid off for USC, who has a lot to offer right now. On paper, they have one of the best defensive coaching staffs in the country, and Coach Deontin Lynn, who's come from the NFL. He revitalized UCLA's defense last year, seems to be on track to do that at USC. Coach Entz, the linebackers coach, he's a national championship coach from the SCF level. You got Doug Belk in the secondary. You add Coach Henney to the defensive line, along with Coach Nua. On paper, that staff's as good as any staff in the country. They just had to prove it again at USC. Through 2 games, they were able to do that. They were able to give Tai Jackson a presentation about how he would fit in the defense, what the trajectory of this program is. He felt very comfortable with that. Then he just liked being at USC. Some kids love college towns. He fit that vibe at USC, called it like a Disney World type atmosphere, Universal Studios, like the big city at USC. But more than anything, again, playing for that coaching staff, for this program that they view on the rise, sold him on it. He was going to commit in December. Yeah. He jumped in the fold, committed in person. And I asked his dad, Samaj, this morning if he still planned to take visits to these programs that are closer to home. Florida, Alabama, Florida State. He had an official visit scheduled to Florida State at the end of November. That's where his mom went to school. He's not going back to any of those schools. He's locked in with USC right now, and one of the jewels of a class that ranks number 15 nationally. They got a chance to make a run into the top 10, Josh.
Do you think USC, you said Tai Jackson's going to lock in, not take any more visits. Do you think they learned anything about cross-country recruiting between Justice Terry and Elijah Gibson?
Dude, they're going to keep swinging. They're going to recruit the best players in the country that they think are championship level players. They think that they have the coaching staff and the program that would be attractive to those players. Win some, you lose some, but they're not going to be afraid to go into SEC country and recruit the best of the best. USC's on a bye week this weekend before they go to Ann Arbor. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of their coaches on the road in SEC country beating down doors saying, come out to LA. It's different. Come be a Trojan. And they're not going to be discouraged by recruitments that don't go their way. They're not going to be discouraged by recruitments of young men that decommit. They're going to hang in, continue to recruit those guys. Yeah. But more than anything, it's about performance on the field. Play well, put an attractive product out there, and then see what happens at the end of the cycle. Getting arguably the top linebacker in the country in 2026 committed, and Xavier Griffin. He's back out there this weekend. That's big for USC. He's arguably the top linebacker in the country. They don't care that they lost out on some targets to Georgia in 2025. They're back there in 2026 recruiting Xavier Griffin. They have Tai Jackson in the fold. The strength of this class is on defense. They're already loading up on defense in the next cycle. That is certainly a focal point for Lincoln Riley and company. It started with putting the staff in place prior to the season. Recruits are buying in. We're starting to see the results on the field. They'll win some, they lose some, but there's a lot of resources and infrastructure behind this program as well. And if they're winning, that's going to make for a dangerous combination on the trail as they close out 2025 and then get off and running in 2026.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't mean that they shouldn't be scared of recruiting the South. You got to. The best players are there. What I meant is Tai Jackson is now shutting down his recruitment. USC making sure, hey, if we're going to recruit somebody from over on the other side of the country, once he's committed, maybe they learned you can't have them all willy-nilly across the country just taking visits. They're going to flip. So Tai Jackson shutting it down. That's what we're hearing. And USC is not done. New prediction, Steve. You dropped it on Sunday. Tell us about, I'll let you tell the people about it.
Yeah, maybe the most electric receiver in the country, certainly one of them. Jerome Miles, he's 6'3". He runs 10.3 in the 100-meter dash. He runs 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. He visited USC over the weekend, and talking to sources with knowledge of that recruitment, I like where the Trojans stand, and my on-3 RPM reflects that. My pick was on Utah. I've liked Utah at various points in that recruitment. I've liked Texas A&M maybe at some points in that recruitment. He visited A&M 2 weekends ago, but I believe that all the momentum is with USC right now for Jerome Miles. Just Lincoln Riley, his offenses, Dennis Simmons, some of the receivers that he has helped develop over the course of his career. Again, getting around the Trojans program, there's so much excitement seeing guys like Branch making plays in that offense. I like where USC stands for Jerome Miles. I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the next in the fold for Lincoln Riley and his staff.
All right, that's huge because just a couple weeks ago, Georgia offered, Ohio State was also involved. Mm-hmm. So for them to go in and pull him from those teams, and I know Utah was the team trending on the RPM, but there's some heavy hitters also involved. So what's the timeline for Jerome Miles? Do you still think he's going to take out his decision, make a couple more visits, or could we hear something this week?
Well, he's got a trip to Georgia planned for later. He wants to get out to Ohio State. But as I talked to you guys this morning, This is a broadcast that will be public later in the afternoon. I think USC is in a great spot right now. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the next in the fold.
All right. So what does this USC class look like if they can really get on a roll here?
Man, there's so many blue chippers out there that have a keen eye on USC. Josh, let's start with Jakeem Stewart, 5-star defensive lineman that's obviously trying to reclassify. He's no longer enrolled at St. Augustine in New Orleans. USC beating LSU in the opener was huge. Again, these guys want to see what USC looks like on the field. No one's doing a better job of building relationships. Coach Eric Henderson has stepped into college football and quickly become one of the premier recruiters, not only because of his resume, but because he genuinely likes building relationships with these kids, their families, their trainers, and he builds a great connection. Now he can point towards how hard they're playing, the 2 showings that they've had on the field. They were hitting hard against LSU. They just had a shutout against Utah State. USC is in the top 2 or 3 the whole time for Jakeem Stewart. Maybe has been number 1 at times. I think Ohio State's been number 1 at times. I know LSU is going to try and make a push, but I feel like USC, after they beat LSU, really grabbed some major momentum there. So Jakeem Stewart is certainly one. If if USC's trying to get greedy at the linebacker position, they got Madden Faramo out there as well. He was back on campus this weekend. They still have his official visit in play. He's an on-3 industry top 100 recruit that also likes Texas, Notre Dame, and Washington. We'll see where the chips fall with this USC class moving forward, but he's certainly high on the Trojans. Elijah Griffin wants to get out for a game. Now, I would point towards Georgia still. He's going to take his official visit to Georgia for the Mississippi State game. I have that marked as a potential commit weekend, but he's going to be at Miami this weekend as well. But USC, good relationship. He's been out before, wants to get back for a game. So he comes to mind. And then there's a lot of potential flips out there too. Well, I shouldn't say potential flips, but guys that they lost on, that are committed elsewhere, that there's still communication. I'll try and remember them all. There's an article on the On3 website right now on Whip Around that kind of goes into it, but you got Dalen McCutcheon, receiver committed to Florida State. USC was one of the finalists. Dorian Brew, cornerback / safety, committed to Oregon. Trojans aren't going to go away for Dorian Brew. Same with defensive back Alex Graham, who's committed to Colorado right now. Floyd Bacard's a defensive lineman that's committed to Oklahoma. I believe at one point he was a silent to USC. So Floyd Bacard's someone that USC's not going to go away on. There's more. You can ask me specifically, Josh, if you got some names, but USC, they got a chance to finish with a top 10 class. They got to keep it rolling. Another huge opportunity in Ann Arbor coming off a bye week to grab another big win.
Yeah, and I saw Scott Schrader on our We Are SC site on the On3 network mention IMG linebacker Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng as a name for USC fans to watch. I know that's been a heated Texas-Michigan battle, but do you think the Trojans
Notre
can
Dame's
get
in there?
Notre Dame as well, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of goes in line with how greedy can they get at linebacker? Where are these spots now being diversified in the class? I think – I don't know if they were expecting Tai Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Like, this wasn't one where they led behind the scenes.
I mean, you said heading into the weekend, you didn't call it a throwaway visit. I'm not going to say that, but you kind of had the laissez-faire attitude, like, yeah, USC is going to take a swing at him.
Well, that's exactly right. Shoot your shot. And damn, they hit from deep, man. And again,
that's why you shoot your shot. That's why.
But it's not like Tai Jackson went out there with no relationship, right? It's just he had been to Florida like 8 to 10 times. He's been to Florida State a bunch. He's been to Alabama. Took an official visit to Penn State. This was his first time at USC. Now, the trust in the people got him out there, but then the vibe, the environment, that was him. At least, coming out of the trip, he committed on the spot, loved the defensive presentation, loves where the program's going, loved the big town feel of Los Angeles. Some kids want that college campus feel. He apparently wants to be in the city. Nothing like Los Angeles. He's a Trojan, and that's a piece that they can build this defense around for years to come.
Who is more surprised at this? You, Florida Gators, Florida State Seminoles, or Alabama? Who's more surprised at Tai Jackson committing to USC?
Well, I'm sitting inside Lucas Oil Stadium ready to watch my Colts take on the Houston Texans. And I get a text that Tai Jackson committed to USC, and I was surprised, man. I mean, like, the national anthem's going on, and it's time to work. We got a great team at On3 that helped us get that story out quickly. They send, Tai Jackson's dad sends me a photo of Tai and Lincoln Riley, and it's go time, baby. He committed to USC. I mean, they weren't going out there expecting to commit. Again, he was going to commit on December 4th. One of the reasons why they were waiting till December is because they didn't want to be a family that committed early and then flipped late in the cycle when schools came back around. But that visit was just so strong. It was so him. And we spent time with Tai Jackson at the On3 Elite Series. I can see him fitting in that USC culture and that vibe, being out there myself in the summer, spending time with Lincoln Riley and company. Now, they got to keep rolling. They got to keep winning. But Lincoln Riley showing people that he didn't forget how to coach. There were some naysayers after last season, like he didn't take 3 teams to the college football playoff. And again, he hired a terrific defensive staff. You're only as good as the coaches you have around you. He does a great job himself, obviously, coaching the quarterbacks, running the offense. He has a good offensive staff. But that defensive staff, again, I've said it a bunch, second to none in college football. There's some other terrific defensive staffs that can go toe-to-toe, but you look at those guys' resumes, they've accomplished a lot.
All right, 2026, we got to talk about Ryder Lyons. He's the number 3 ranked quarterback for On3 in the 26 class. He was on campus. Steve, what are you hearing on Ryder Lyons?
Still like where USC stands there. I think he'll ultimately be their quarterback of the future. What class he's in, 26, 27, I'm not sure. But look, USC didn't sign a quarterback in 2024. Getting Julian Lewis in 2025 is major. Then getting Ryder Lyons behind, and whether that's 2026 or 2027, you need to start building that stable with high-end talent. Went into the portal, got Jaden Maeva from UNLV. That was big. Miller Moss is obviously showing what he can do under a coach like Lincoln Riley. How about his career being rejuvenated by this coaching staff? I don't know if we see Miller Moss lighten it up like we do without this coaching staff and this offense. And good for him to come out there and have the command and the presence and be in the moment and make all the plays. So that's certainly coming together for USC. But watching Miller Moss thrive has been huge in the Rider Lions recruitment specifically. And again, the intel favors Julian Lewis rocking with USC when all said and done as well. So, and the big component for Julian Lewis was always, who are you going to recruit around me? What are we going to look like defensively? Can we compete for championships? And I think that they're certainly seeing that USC is recruiting at a very exciting level right now.
Yeah, they're building it up. So far, so good. USC fans, talk to Steve and I. How are we feeling about this class? You heard what is left on the board. Who do you want USC to close with? Let us know. Comment section below.
Like and subscribe.
Steve, let's head out to Lincoln, Nebraska. We got to talk some Husker recruiting. There were some big highlights from the weekend. Colorado comes into town. They get humbled, and Nebraska is riding high after their week 2 win. They had a 5-star athlete on campus, Michael Terry III. He's from the state of Texas. He's trending heavily to the Longhorns heading into this. But what is Michael Terry saying coming out of this Nebraska visit?
Josh, I had so much fun talking to you about this on our Recruit Reaction show right after the game on the On3 Recruits channel. We had Hayes Fawcett on there. Michael Terry was trying to get on with us 2 hours after the game. So he was in that locker room having a great time around the players, the coaches, and he really feels that Nebraska is going to win for a long time. Now, is it enough to surpass Texas in this recruitment? Let's see where the dust settles. But he had a fantastic time at Nebraska, spent time with TJ Lateef, Cortez Mills, certainly got around Coach McGuire, Coach Rule. No program is recruiting Michael Terry harder than Nebraska right now, and he couldn't have picked a better weekend to get back. He's been there 3 times this calendar year. Nebraska is preaching a versatile approach in the offense where he can do a lot of things that also excites him, but it's the people at Nebraska, it's the belief in Matt Rule and company that have Nebraska in the thick of this one for the nation's #1 athlete, Michael Terry.
Now, Christian Jones was also on campus. He's the #1 player in the state of Nebraska, linebacker Christian Jones. This was a really pivotal visit for him. What was he saying after this one?
Man, he said it was the best game environment that he's ever been in, one of his best trips to Nebraska. He's been to Nebraska a ton. He was there the weekend before. He's at the spring game. He's at all the major recruiting weekends. Some about that recruitment has always been like, I think he wants to leave the state, right? Like Notre Dame trended at one point in his process before they filled up at linebacker. But he says he's going to keep watching Nebraska. Now, Oklahoma, he's going to be at Oklahoma this weekend. Oklahoma's a leader before this Nebraska visit. But Matt Rule company going to keep recruiting them, keep getting them on campus, and it was another outstanding environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, where do things stand with these 2 flip targets? We're talking Dawson Merritt, the edge committed to Alabama, and Cortez Mills, who is committed to Oklahoma. They both made it in this weekend, despite fans in our comment section all week saying that they wouldn't make it in. Your intel held true. So now what are you hearing after the visit on Dawson Merritt and Cortez Mills?
Well, sometimes things don't hold true, so we're not going to sit here and pump our chests out. But Dawson Merritt was on campus again. He's visited a couple times since he committed to Alabama. I still think that's going to be a tough flip, an uphill battle. But communication remains with Nebraska, and as long as that's reciprocated from the Merritt family, Matt Rule and company, led by Matt Rule, who's going to recruit Dawson Merritt. Matt Rule coached with his dad. Mm-hmm. Dawson had a fantastic time, man. He talked to me about Nebraska finding their quarterback, about the defense playing well, about it being a great atmosphere. So I think he views Nebraska as a place he can be very successful. Just Alabama is where he's committed, and I haven't heard anything different about a potential flip or anything right now. And then Cortez Mills came in with his mom, was around TJ Lateef a lot. They had those recruits down in like the first row, soaking everything up. Nebraska, they need more playmakers to be the offense they want to be. They feel like they certainly have the quarterback under center now to build around for the next only 2+ years now. We expect them there just 3 at this point. But Dylan Raiola, he's as good a peer recruiter as there is in the country. He knows how important it is for him to help recruit the 2025 and 2026 classes to get more players around him. And I'm still gathering intel on Cortez Mills as I talk to you guys right now, but getting him back to campus is huge, especially because historically Dabo Sweeney, Brent Venables, those guys have been pretty strict on a no-visit policy. So we'll see what that means with Cortez Mills. I think those policies in this day and age in recruiting are outdated. But I never judge how a man's going to run his program. So,
I think you can get away with it as long as you're winning and winning big. I think the more you win, I mean, look at when Clemson was at the top, that was an easy rule to enforce. When Clemson's modern day, it's a little bit harder to enforce that rule.
Absolutely. And when you can just pivot to another great player, like, all right, dude, you want to mess around and lose your spot over here, we'll go get Johnny 4-5-star over here. And, he's happy to play here as well.
All right. There's a lot of 2026 targets on campus, and this is really important because this is where the groundwork gets laid. When we're talking about leaders in the 2025 cycle, these leaders kind of this happens in the spring of the last cycle, the fall of the last cycle, and Nebraska had some heavy hitters on campus for the 2026 cycle. They had the number one offensive tackle in America, Jackson Cantwell, after making a run at Brandon Baker and David Sanders. You kind of wonder if they got involved with David Sanders as early as they're involved with Jackson Cantwell and getting him on campus, would they have had a better shot? Probably. They also had Michael Clayton on campus. Steve, run us through some of these 2026 highlights out of Nebraska.
Yeah, Jackson Cantwell had a great time. Georgia, LSU, Alabama, some of the programs that I thought coming into the fall were in great position, but he's been in Nebraska a couple times now, and he can believe in this program now, right? He can see it with his own eyes that they are on a track record to break a 7-season losing streak. They haven't had a winning season in 7 seasons. So they're about done selling a vision. If they can keep it rolling and showing we're here now, we need you to come in and help us restore Nebraska back to what it was in the 90s. Jackson Cantwell enjoyed being around the staff. He was one of the most recognized recruits on campus. There's not a fan base that treats recruits better when they're on campus than the Nebraska fans, and he was certainly one of the faces in the crowd. You can't miss him. I mean, the man is as big as Taylor Lewan, if not a little bigger, who was there on campus with Will Compton. He got a shout out on that show. So he felt like a celebrity in that Nebraska recruiting section, and Nebraska's not going to drop the ball recruiting Jackson Cantwell moving forward. And he's someone that could play right away. He could at a lot of places, but at Nebraska, I think if he picked the Huskers, you pencil him right in at the top of the depth chart there at one of those tackle positions. So it's an advantageous deal for him. And then Michael Clayton's a quarterback from Florida. He told me Nebraska leads, so I have an on-3 RPM in favor of the Huskers. Michael Clayton's going to be at South Carolina this weekend. It's going to be a massive weekend in Columbia. That's going to be the highlight of our Recruit Reaction show this weekend, so make sure you South Carolina fans watching right now are locked in with us this weekend as we break down what happens down there in Columbia. But Nebraska's setting the pace in Michael Clayton's recruitment.
All right. Well, Nebraska made a statement this weekend. They moved to 2-0. So Nebraska fans, how are we feeling about the recruiting weekend? Talk to Steve and I. Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk some Miami recruiting. Big visit weekend down in Coral Gables. There was a surprise visitor, a flip target in this video. We're going to break down what went on at Miami as they hosted FAMU and moved to 2-0 on the season. Steve, let's get right into it. 5-star DJ Pickett showed up. We knew that he wanted to see another Miami game after attending that opener in the Swamp, but I didn't know he would be back in Coral Gables this quickly.
Well, he was there with his mom, his cousin Cannon Pickett. He's going to be back for the Florida State game later in the season. I think for Miami, just stay the course, be patient, play the long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. DJ's got 3 more visits to LSU locked in for the season. Happy with his decision. But if Miami continues to play well, there's certainly communication is going to remain led by Mario Cristobal. We'll see what happens as games continue to be played and the season goes on. We've seen Miami win a bunch of these kind of recruitments under Mario Cristobal and his staff since they've been in Coral Gables. And again, just keep the lines of communication open, keep playing well, don't have any letdowns. You get them back for the Florida State game, and we'll see what happens as games are played elsewhere.
All right. Now, TJ Alford, he was on campus. He's the linebacker committed to Ohio State. He did so early in the summer, and I always kind of thought that this recruitment would come back around, but it stayed quiet all summer. We didn't hear a word really about TJ Alford and Miami, but this week he shows up at FAMU. How significant of a visit was this?
Well, certainly from just a eyeball, top 100 player committed elsewhere, a place where Miami has really had their number. They've had Ohio State's number on the recruiting trail over the last couple cycles. It's certainly eye-opening. And we'll see what happens with Miami, what they do at linebacker recruiting as this cycle continues. They lost Elijah Melendez, who's trending towards Auburn, but Kellen Wiley was on campus this weekend as well, Josh. And I get the sense he is their top linebacker target right now, uncommitted. He stayed overnight into Sunday. He's got great size and length. He's playing well. He's a late eval for Miami, but just with the way he carries himself, his size and his upside, he has really risen up the board for Miami. And I think the Hurricanes are in great position for Kellen Wiley.
Yeah, and Wiley plays at Powerhouse Armwood High School in Tampa. They went down to Miami Central. Wiley had a huge game down there, so he's on the board. He is a target that they are pursuing pretty hard. Let's talk a little 2026 buzz coming out of the weekend for the Canes.
A couple 2026s I want to highlight, and there were so many of them that had a great time. But Derek Cooper, one of the top athletes in the country from Chaminade, Madonna, kind of a fascinating conversation I had with him, Josh. He's never seen Miami be good in his life, which just goes to show you how fast time flies around here. Because I feel like it's just yesterday Miami was good, and I'm 42 years old.
Greatest team ever assembled.
Yeah, so exactly right. Miami's had 2 dynasties in my life, but they have not had any in Derek Cooper's life. But for him to say, look, my parents have told me about them being good before, and to see it restored, is exciting. I think Miami's setting the tone in that recruitment right now because of that. Now, again, he wants to go see some other powerhouse programs, but what a time to get hot with Derek Cooper. Jabari Brady is another local playmaker that gave the visit high reviews. Talking to several of the offensive linemen that were on campus over the weekend. They're certainly in good shape early with a lot of their top targets at the point of attack. So Miami, top 5 class in 2024, going to maybe push for that in 2025. Certainly a third straight top 10 class in 2025 is a good bet. 2026 could be really special for Miami coming off a fantastic season. They got to keep it rolling. It's all the coach speak when you talk to people around that building. We're only as good as our last game. Got to keep playing well. USF's performance against Alabama certainly has them looking at how tough a game that one's going to be. They're taking them all one by one this season. So far, so good. And these recruitments, again, Dennis Smith tweeted it last week, their general manager, recruiting's a marathon, not a sprint. So we'll see.
All right, Miami fans, big potential for both the 25 and 26 class. Who are your most important remaining targets? Talk to Steve and I. Let us know. Comment section below. Right down there. All right, Steve, let's head to Athens. We got to talk Georgia recruiting right now. First home game. It was back. They're back in Athens. The Dogs hosted a couple flip targets. One of the most important ones was Tennessee commitment, edge CJ Gass. Now, I remember when he made his commitment just about 5 or 6 weeks ago. It was a really tough decision to leave the state of Georgia and pick Tennessee. Now he's back in Athens. Tell me, is this a significant movement?
Well, I think it's big for Georgia. It shows that they're still alive. I think it was, will he show up on campus? And he did. And so that's the first step. Communication remains with Glenn Schumann, Coach Chidera, Uzo Diribe. There were times down the stretch where I thought he was still going to end up at Georgia. Tennessee's done a fantastic job in this recruitment as well. I could certainly see him sticking with the Vols. They're playing at a high level defensively right now under Coach Tim Banks and company. But Georgia, they had some big flips at the end of last cycle, getting KJ Bolden away from Florida State. He's that level of a target for Georgia here in this cycle.
All right. And now he's not the only flip target left. But before we get to the next flip target, I want to talk about a prospect that it was a surprise. Rashad Johnson flipped his commitment just about 2 hours before kickoff. Last weekend, it was Elijah Melendez that did it. This weekend, it was Rashad Johnson. He flips his commitment from Georgia to Texas A&M. So where does Georgia turn from here? I got a couple ideas. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Georgia Tech safety commit, Rashawn Dinkins, he's a name. Or what about Tay Harris? I know he was at the Clemson-Georgia game as a Clemson recruit, but Georgia's been involved with him in the past. Could you see them pursuing either one of these to fill the void left by Rashad Johnson?
Well, they've been keeping Tay Harris warm even before Tom decommitted from Georgia, and they fought to keep Rashad Johnson in the fold. He visited Texas A&M for their opener against Notre Dame, but Georgia tried to keep him in. He was a take. Dinkins is someone that's emerging with a strong senior year, committed to Georgia Tech. He's a guy that they're starting to hit the gas on. Senior evals will be big for this Georgia staff, so we'll see who else they go after. And they could go after a guy that's high profile, committed elsewhere. I mean, again, Georgia's not one of those programs that typically wins the day-to-day of recruiting. I mean, they got some aces on the staff that are really good. Coach Deribe comes to mind. Coach David Cooper is one of the best off-field guys in the business. But a lot of Georgia's recruiting is done by saying, we win a lot of games, we get you drafted very high. And then when guys visit, they get around the players on the team and they feel an outstanding culture. Players love playing at Georgia and they love having that G on their chest and they love talking about it. So maybe Georgia's not out recruiting someone Monday through Friday, but when they get a kid on campus and get them around their players are some of the best salesmen for why you should come to Georgia. And if you are uber competitive, that's the place for you. And that's why we're able to see them win out so often on the trail with the right guys. And they could go out and flip someone we're not talking about right now that's made up of that DNA.
All right, let's move to the defensive line where Georgia had another flip target on campus. That's defensive tackle. Committed to Florida, Jeremiah McLeod. What are you hearing on McLeod? Because there's been a lot of Florida-Georgia battles, and the Bulldogs usually come out on top on these. So McLeod committed to the Gators but showed up in Athens this weekend.
Yeah, he said Georgia fits him. I think that he's a guy that's rising up Georgia's board. I could see him in the Bulldogs class. He had a great visit. Trey Scott's another one of those top recruiters that Georgia has of building connections with their top D-line targets. He does a fantastic job. He really enjoyed being around Trey Scott. So as Georgia works on the 2 5-star defensive linemen, Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin, the number 1s and number 2 defensive linemen in the country from in-state. You also have Kevin Wynn committed to Florida State, and you have Jeremiah here. I could see all 4 of them in Georgia's class when all said and done. And you already know that I'm still predicting Georgia to finish with On3's number 1 ranked recruiting class. They got to pull these recruitments out, but the meat is on the bone for them to rise from 4 to number 1 when all said and done.
All right. Now, on 300 running back Usman Kroma, he attended the Georgia game, although he's trending heavily to Auburn. Last weekend, he watched the Tigers win. This weekend, he was in Athens. What's going on with Usman Kroma?
Well, this recruitment's been fluid, and there's been some teams that have been hot at different times. Florida State's another that has had their time in the sun with Kroma. I'm still rocking with Auburn, but you and I both know and have talked about it in the past. If Georgia's turning it up, you never count them out. And so they certainly could go out there and land Kroma. What would be interesting is that Georgia's in the thick of it for another in-state running back that they like, Shane Marshall, who's committed to Minnesota. Shane's going to visit for the Auburn game. He's got an official visit locked in. He's a senior riser type player that's got a lot of trait that Georgia's in the mix for. They already have Bo Walker committed. Is it Shane Marshall, who we know they have the gas on, or is it Kroma, who there's just been a lot of flirting from both sides. Let's see how real it ultimately gets.
All right. Now, there was a major 2026 target on campus that's committed to South Carolina. The number 2 linebacker in America, Rodney Colton, was in Athens over the weekend. Pretty significant trip?
I think so. I mean, it's early in his process. Him coming off the board early for Shane Beamer and company is big, but they knew they were going to have to fight to keep him. He's been to Georgia several times. This was his latest experience. And he loves the way they play, loves the style. Said that Georgia's always going to remain in his top. So I don't get the sense that he's shutting the door on the Bulldogs anytime soon.
All right, Georgia fans, talk to us. Let us know. Comment section below how we feeling about recruiting in 2025. All right, Steve, let's go around the nation. I want to talk about some major developments and just get your opinion on it. We'll start with Justice Terry. He was at Alabama this week. I know he's trending heavily to Georgia, but was this a big visit for the Tide?
Absolutely, and it was one that I didn't necessarily see coming. I knew he was going to be back at Alabama to watch the Crimson Tide host Georgia. And Georgia's the on-3 RPM favorite, but I'm starting to get the sense that Alabama's more than a dark horse in this recruitment. He was on campus with his parents. They all had a great time. Coach Freddie Roach has been the lead recruiter. That connection's been strong, and it'll be interesting to see. Games I generally don't feel like impact recruitments as much as like the comments maybe suggest when they get done visiting places. But if Coach Kalen DeBoer and this first-year Alabama staff can beat Georgia in Tuscaloosa with Justice Terry and what's going to be other blue chip recruits watching, maybe that's an inch that helps them win this recruitment off the field. My RPM's still with Georgia, but it's like Justice Terry. I got a keen eye on Alabama moving forward and interested to see how it continues to play out, because we definitely know Justice Terry's capable of committing somewhere other than Georgia. He did it once with USC. Could he do it again with Alabama?
All right, now Deuce Knight was at Auburn. We heard heading into the weekend that this could be the weekend that he makes it official. Do you think the fact that Auburn laid an egg at home against Cal maybe hurt their chances? Do you think if they would have beat Cal, Deuce Knight would be committed by now?
No, I think that it just wasn't the right moment for him to flip his commitment from Notre Dame to Auburn. I still ultimately think that it's trending that way for the Tigers. And I think he saw a football team that turned the ball over 4 times where they beat Cal. And he sees a place that's trending upwards that he could come in and have a major impact. And nothing else changes. Auburn's in the SEC. It's close to home. He's built a fantastic relationship with that coaching staff. He sees all the talent they've loaded up at wide receiver in that true freshman class. It's a really good recruiting class coming together in 2025. I think he's had conversations with prospects about what that would look like with him joining the fold, who would come with him, things of that nature. So I still like the way it's trending for Auburn. We'll see if he shows back up at Ole Miss or Notre Dame. Maybe that murkies things up a little bit, but I still like Auburn here as they chase the nation's #1 class. I give the betting odds to Georgia, but Auburn's on the board with odds, and Deuce Knight would be a major pickup as in that race.
All right, let's head down to Tallahassee and check on Florida State's recruiting death spiral after losing Myron Charles to Texas on Saturday. Prized edge Javen Hilson announces his decommitment from FSU on Sunday. And Steve, you waste no time picking his next destination. Tell the people about your latest prediction.
Yeah, I got an on-3 RPM prediction in favor of Texas for Javen Hilson. Coming out of his official visit to Texas in the summer, there was a little bit of buzz that the Longhorns led at that time as well. Florida State was able to right that ship, get him in the fold, get his commitment. But we've seen Texas be the leader in the summer and then rally after maybe a hurdle. That happened with Josiah Sharma. It looked like Josiah Sharma was going to Texas. Then Oregon, for a split second, gets him in the fold. And then Myron Charles. There was a lot of buzz that Texas was giving him a lot to think about. Then he just kind of made a surprise commitment to Florida State. I know my RPM ended up being right for Myron Charles in that moment when he committed to Florida State, but I was thinking I needed to change my pick to Texas. And then he popped up for Florida State, and I was like, okay, interesting. But Texas gets Myron Charles in the fold. Maybe that's what happens with Javen Hilson. I expect him back in Austin for a game visit sometime this season. Their competition might be UCF right now. Josh, Gus Malzahn and company doing a great job in state. They're certainly in the thick of it. Now, with a player the caliber of Javen Hilson decommitting, that phone starts ringing and some major players start jumping in. So Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, those are some programs that you certainly start thinking about. Can they make a run at Javen Hilson? And he's been committed to Alabama before, so we know he's got mad love for them.
Right.
But Texas and UCF, I know, are way in that one right now, and I like where the Longhorns stand. He's going to announce in December. We'll see if that timeline sticks. It didn't stick for Tai Jackson and USC, but I like where Texas stands, and that's where the on-3 RPM lies.
And I think that'll be a big recruitment. Like you said, I mean, he's big, he's fast, he's athletic, he's from the state of Florida. I think Javen Hilson's
hard.
Yeah.
Plays hard, plays for one of the best high school coaches in the state for one of the most hard-nosed high school programs in the Southeast at Cocoa. He's wired right, man, and he plays in big games. He'd be a big pickup for anybody, and I think right now it would be for Texas. Texas is putting together one of the best defensive line classes in the country. When you look at this top 5 class right now, they are loaded up front already, across the front with versatile attacking style defensive linemen. They have Jonah Williams committed at safety, who is a Swiss Army knife on the back end of your defense. And then it's another massive offensive line class for Texas too. And I think the biggest thing with Texas football right now, as they make the playoff last year, they're one of the favorites to win the national championship this year, is just the culture change, how physical this program is, how they're able to go up into Ann Arbor against a Michigan team that maybe had a lot of turnover on the coaching staff and on the field. But the one thing that they were going to be is physical and tough. And Texas was able to do what they wanted against a program that historically has been tough around the line of scrimmage and physical, and it's a black and blue game. And Texas was in complete control. And that just shows you how far this program has come, because even like 3 years ago, they weren't there. They were starting to get there. Now they have depth. They're stacking recruiting classes. I don't think Texas is going anywhere for a while. Players like Javen Hilson see that, and he would be another major addition as they try and stay competitive for years to come.
He'd be a massive addition to anybody's roster. All right, let's talk the latest on 5-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola. Today's September 9th. Steve, where are we at with him?
I'm going to just be quick on Andrew Babalola, Josh. I think people feel good around Auburn. I think people feel good around Michigan. And I think people feel good around Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a program that we haven't given as much burn as we have Auburn and Michigan. But I think people feel good around Oklahoma. I think there's people around Andrew Babalola that would love to see him at Stanford. So you never rule out Stanford. And they've done a good job recruiting him. They got 2 offensive line coaches. So we wait, man. I mean, this is one where he tried to commit in the summer, tried to commit before the first day of school, tried to commit before his first game. I've talked to people that said he's pretty sure about knowing what he's going to do. But for whatever the reason, and that's his business, he's working through it with his family. He hasn't been able to narrow it down to one. He's got great options. He continues to talk regularly with them. Those programs are going to remain patient, because I've talked to coaches behind the scenes that say that if it all comes together for Andrew Babalola, they wouldn't be surprised if he is tackle number 1 in the NFL draft down the road. I mean, certainly you got guys like David Sanders, Michael Fasusi are uber talented. Oklahoma has another tackle committing, Ryan Foji, who's really good. But Andrew Babalola, coaches gush behind the scenes about his upside and what the player he could be on the next level.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for sticking around for another action-packed episode of the Wiltfong Whip Around. Steve, we'll be back on Thursday.
Yeah, previewing big visit weekends, talking more recruiting. There's going to be a lot of South Carolina talk on the next Whip Around, maybe even some Wisconsin talk as they bring Alabama into town, but certainly a lot of 5-star conversation as well. Thanks for tuning in. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on Thursday.